the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. And we're delighted to have a warrior on this program tonight, a warrior by the name of Mark Krikorian, who has been a leader in the fight against illegal immigration. And now he's written a book called The New Case Against Immigration, in which he says we've got to put a moratorium on both legal as well as illegal immigration. And you're the head of the Center for Immigration Studies.
Yes, I am.
How did you get involved in this issue?
Well, it's a good question. A long time ago, I just kind of stumbled into it, really, without thinking about it. What really drew me initially into the issue was the bilingual education issue. And I came to realize, as I looked at it more, that bilingual education and the whole bilingualism really was more just a symptom of inordinately high levels of immigration into a modern society. It wasn't really the cause of the problem. It was a symptom. And so, I really came to conclude immigration itself, excessive immigration itself, was the problem we needed to address.
But why has there been insufficient support for making English the official language?
Well, there's a good deal of public support, obviously, but in Congress there's not that much support. I think there's a couple of things. First of all, it's one of those, like immigration itself, it's an up-down kind of issue, elites versus the public. And as you get out into levels of government that are closer to the public, state government, county government, they're a lot more likely to have official English legislation. A lot of states, in fact, most states have official English rules. But the farther away you get, the less likely it is, and the more kind of a multiculturalist mindset and a corporate kind of multiculturalism, as well as left multiculturalism, end up squashing that kind of thing. So, but see, my point is that even if we had legislation that said English was the official language, because it really already is anyway, and the Constitution is in English, it is the official language. But if we had a formal declaration of that, but we still had 1.5 million immigrants coming in every year, it's still not going to make any difference. Banks are still going to have you press 1 for English when you call up. That's not something that Congress is going to be able to change without changing immigration policy.
Although, from personal experience, my mother grew up in a home where English was not spoken. And they would not promote her from the first grade until she learned English. So there was a penalty, and she learned English, and as a result of which I was able to go to Harvard and do a lot of other things, which in those days I couldn't have done had I not been fluent in the English language. So there were penalties or disabilities attached to a failure to learn English in times gone by, which are not here today.
But even that was a difference in our elites. In other words, people who run schools. We're now Americanizing kids in public schools, except the National Education Association is doing the Americanizing. Yeah. That's the problem. When I went to kindergarten, I didn't speak any English. I grew up speaking Armenian.
Really?
I understood it. I watched cartoons and all that.
Where'd you grow up?
Boston and Cleveland. Maybe.
Where in Boston?
Arlington, Winchester.
Yeah, I grew up in Boston, and I had a number of Armenian friends, especially in Watertown.
My father's from Watertown.
Yeah, I had a classmate of mine at Latin School at Harvard, Martin Goshgarian, who was a brilliant man, and of course he was of Armenian heritage. And my spiritual mentor over the years has been R.J. Rushdoony, who was an Armenian.
Right. Yes,
and for many generations they lived until the Turks came after them in Armenia. I won't get you into that issue. That's a separate issue
show.
Right now.
I'll come back for that show.
But tell me why you're against legal immigration as well as illegal immigration. Talk about your book.
Well, let me, there's the cover. It's kind of a provocative cover with the Statue of Liberty.
It's got
saying,
and it has the UN colors.
Well, I didn't pick the colors. I guess so. The publishers picked the colors. The cover is striking, and the point of the cover is to get people to pick it up.
For those who can't see it, the cover shows Miss Liberty and the Statue of Liberty with her hand up saying, all of you poor huddled masses, don't come here.
Doesn't quite say that, but that's the point of the image. Now, the book isn't as red meat or provocative maybe as the cover suggests, but there is the title is accurate. It does describe it right, because my point here is, the punchline of the book is that today's immigrants really aren't less appealing or less desirable than yesterday's immigrants, than the immigrants of the Ellis Island period. They're really not that different. They come from different countries, but they're very similar people. What's different is us. Our society has changed in good ways and bad ways. I mean, multiculturalism, but also easy communications and transportation across the oceans, and we now have a post-industrial economy. There's a lot of changes, good and bad, all of which mark us as a more mature, developed society. And so we, in a sense, have outgrown mass immigration in a way that 100 years ago wasn't true. We could cope with it then. We benefited from it. It was, even then, there were costs, but we benefited from it. Today, we have essentially moved beyond it. We're in a different phase of our national development, and it's something we need to leave behind.
Well, let me say that, good, bad, or ugly, when I went to the government schools, we called them public schools in those days, growing up in Boston, my teachers loved this country, and they taught the people in our classes to love the country as well. And there was no uniformity. We had Greek Americans, Armenian Americans, Jewish Americans, Chinese Americans, black Americans, and all were taught that this was the greatest country on the face of the earth, and that they ought in various ways to assimilate to our culture. And that's what every teacher I had. You know, America's good, communism is bad, but that isn't there anymore.
No, it's not. And again, that's not something the immigrants have brought with them or imposed on us. I mean, when my mother went to Medford, Massachusetts public schools, her parents were immigrants, they brought her to school and they essentially said, you need to teach her about being an American. You know, we don't know, we're lucky enough to, teach her how to be an adult and teach her to be a Christian. You need to teach her to be an American. And she memorized the Gettysburg Address and sang Hail Columbia and learned George Washington was the father of our country. Just saying that obviously elicits a chuckle because immigrant kids aren't learning that in the LA Unified School District and in the New York Public Schools today. And it's not because the immigrant parents are demanding something different. It's because we are expecting something different of them. And the problem here, and I say this often, and libertarians will respond to me, or high immigration people on the right will say, you're right, so let's just end multiculturalism and leave immigration alone. There was a book by Jason Riley, who's an editorial writer at the Wall Street Journal, called The Case for Open Borders, or something like that. Yeah, let them in, The Case for Open Borders. And he said, keep the immigrants, deport the Columbia faculty. Now, as appealing as that might be to deport the Columbia faculty, multiculturalism isn't just some superficial thing. I mean, as you suggested, every public school, every corporate human resources department, every police department has sort of multiculturalist assumptions.
And now you have McDonald's promoting the homosexual agenda.
Sure. I mean, my point is, it's not something that with one ballot initiative or one piece of legislation, even say official English or something, we could fix. And until we're able to fix that, it's just crazy to take in 1.5 million people every year who need to be Americanized.
So we're not changing them, they're changing us.
To some significant degree. I mean, immigrants obviously change when they come here too, but yes, we are conforming to their ways to a degree that would have been unheard of in the past. For instance, just recently there was a report of a Tyson chicken plant in Tennessee that had ended Labor Day. They just abolished Labor Day as a holiday, and they replaced it with Eid al-Fitr, which is the Islamic holiday at the end of Ramadan, and that's now an official holiday for the whole factory, regardless of what religion you are. I mean, Henry Ford sure wouldn't have done that 100 years ago. You can be sure of that.
It really is amazing, and other than limiting the influx of immigrants, what do you do about it?
Well, there's a lot. I'm only writing about the immigration policy part, but my point is, whatever we do about it, trying to restore a healthy civic culture, whether it's ballot initiatives that Ward Connerly is doing, or private efforts at improving history education, kind of reanimating American history education, whatever it is you do, you need to reduce immigration first. In other words, when you're in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. And the case I'm making is we need to stop digging. Other people are experts in how we get out of the hole, and I have some ideas, and I pretty much would support most of whatever they are, but my job is to get us to stop digging the hole any deeper.
How significant has it been that there have been different priorities established as to the origins of the immigrants who were admitted to the United States.
Not as important, I think, as some people think. I mean, until 1965, we had a quota system in the law that limited immigration from Southern and Eastern Europe and gave larger quotas to Northern and Western Europe, although even those most weren't really used very often. But the point is, that's why the 65 law changed the immigration system. It was seen as discriminatory, ethnically discriminatory. What's happened is we now have a complete shift from European immigration to mostly Latin American and East and South Asian immigration. In fact, Hispanics make up more than 50% now of the total immigrant population. That's one ethnic group dominating immigration. We've never had anything like that before. I mean, the census in 1910, I looked it up for the book, there was much more diversity, if you will, then. Immigration today is much less diverse, but doesn't, from my perspective, it really doesn't even matter where the immigrants are coming from, and not even that important how diverse it is, because wherever they're coming from, and however mixed up they are, the basic conflict between mass immigration and the characteristics of a modern society is still there.
We're going to take a break. Our guest is Mark Krikorian, author of an important book, The New Case Against Immigration, both legal and illegal. Stay with us. Mark will have much more in the way of valuable insights to share with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Congressman Tom Tancredo. You know, I just returned from a hearing on the southern border in a place called Brownsville, Texas. One of the participants in the hearing told us that for them, a border really doesn't exist between the United States and Mexico. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people have that attitude, that there are no such things as borders, that they really don't matter, that they're just lines on a map and nobody should pay attention to them, and that we're all just residents of the North American continent. Well, you know what? That's baloney. It's baloney, but only if you will do something about it to prove to the people of this country, and especially to your elected officials, that you know borders matter, that you know the sovereignty of this country is at risk, and that you will take action to make sure that they understand it. That action is best taken by calling your local talk radio stations, writing letters to the editor, and of course, letting members of Congress know that you know. That's the best thing. They're hoping, as a matter of fact, that no one really picks up on this issue of a North American trade association that essentially eliminates borders. But the fact is it's happening. You can see parts of it all of the time. So it's something that we need to stop. America, and I mean the United States of America, not the continent, but the United States of America is at stake. Do your part.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, Chairman of the Conservative Caucus, with Mark Krikorian, Executive Director of the Center for Immigration Studies and author of an important new book, The New Case Against Immigration. Let me pose a question to you, which we discussed off camera. Isn't it the case that many people come to the United States because of the education, the free medical care, the welfare benefits, Social Security, etc.? If you eliminated some of those benefits, would not that lessen the number of people who come into the States legally and illegally?
It's probably not that many people who come here with having in mind the idea they want to get welfare or something in the United States. What happens is, because immigrants have such low levels of skill and education, because they're 19th century workers and they're coming into a 21st century high-tech economy, they end up making heavy use of services and not paying that much in taxes. The thing is that The idea that if we just eliminated the welfare state, immigrants would leave is wrong on a whole bunch of levels. First of all, get rid of the welfare state, then call me back. I mean, it's just not going to happen. It's part of what modern societies have. And the other thing is, it's not just welfare. It's Social Security, public education, roads, health care. I mean, the government spends about a third of national income at all levels. 100 years ago, it was only 5% of national income. And, you know, that we may be able to change that, tighten it up, reduce it a little bit, but the basic reality of a large government sector reliant on taxpayer funding is part of what modern societies are about. And until that's changed, you just can't talk about mass immigration without bankrupting taxpayers.
It can be fairly argued that the Bush administration and Congress have done far too little to tighten the borders, to limit even legal immigration. But if Bush is successful, if Robert Pastor is successful, we could wind up with something called the North American Union, which would eliminate all borders with Mexico and Canada. What has been the impact of the European Union's policy of eliminating borders among the 27 member governments of the European Union?
Well, what's happened, if you're looking only within the EU, there was significant migration of people from Spain and Italy and Greece and Portugal into the more developed parts of Europe.
Economic reasons.
Right, exactly. But the gap between Southern Europe and Northern Europe was much smaller than the gap between, say, Mexico or the Caribbean and the United States. I mean, it's just not comparable. People point to that all the time and say, look, it's not a big deal. It worked out for them, and those people eventually went back. Well, you know, sorry. First of all, a lot of them didn't go back. Turkey's not in the EU, but Germany admitted large numbers of Turkish workers in the 50s and 60s, guest workers. That's where our guest worker word comes from, Gastarbeiter. Well, in the early 70s, when the oil shock happened, German government said, okay, well, this is a problem now. We need to stop it. These people will all cycle out of Germany, go home, and that'll be the end of it. Well, it didn't work out that way. They have twice as many foreigners as they did when they ended their supposed temporary worker program. So getting, you know, EU's experience is in no way really relevant, at least its internal experience, to our, you know, policies with Mexico.
McCain and Obama, the two most prominent presidential candidates at this time, this year, and both of them recently spoke to the National Council of La Raza, and McCain has said repeatedly that he has not backed away from his desire to have what he calls comprehensive immigration reform. Obama has taken essentially the same position. I recall the fury of the American people at amnesty and the McCain legislation, the Kennedy-McCain bill, the Bush policy. Where has all that gone?
Hasn't gone away. It's just that with McCain as the nominee, and McCain became the nominee because all of his rivals were opponents of amnesty. They were immigration hawks, and they ended up sort of canceling each other out in a sense. And the man is amazingly persistent. You got to give it to him. I mean, he doesn't give up, and he just was the last person standing. And now what we have, as you said, is the two main candidates have exactly the same views on immigration. They're identical. And I, in fact, just looked for something I'm writing at the Q&A session that after that La Raza speech that McCain gave, and it was very clear that he hasn't changed anything. I mean, it's just purely a kind of rhetorical device to say that he's gotten the message and is for border security first. He doesn't believe it himself. It's just not true.
What can be done?
Well, I mean, one of those guys is going to be president. No disrespect intended for the Constitution Party, but Obama or McCain are going to be president, barring some, you know, unforeseen event. And what's necessary is we're going to need to see the same kind of public mobilization in Congress next year if we're going to stop.
Wait, what about the races for the Senate? Is amnesty an issue in many races?
Not enough, unfortunately. No.
I mean, in South Carolina, a friend of mine, Bob Connolly, has just won the Democrat nomination, and he is terrific on the issue against amnesty, running against someone who's horrible on the issue, Lindsey Graham, a buddy of McCain, but of course Bob Connolly has no money, and his position on the issue is out of sync with that of the Democratic Party elites and leadership. How can we make this an issue in the Senate and House races?
you know, it's really up to the individual
They're basically
members,
following
the individual
the presidential
candidates.
to
Yeah,
watch.
see, that's the problem. And, I mean, that's what's going to happen because the presidential candidates are party
leaders. You've got the
leaders.
national leadership of the Republicans and the Democrats who both support what they euphemistically call comprehensive immigration reform. So the guys who challenge that are not getting the money they need to win.
That's true. And the thing is, it shows about how this isn't a right-left issue, but an up-down issue, that in both the Democratic and Republican Party, there are, in fact, House members and at least Senate candidates who are good on immigration. I mean, there's Heath Shuler, who's a freshman congressman from western North Carolina, is one of the leaders now in trying to get immigration laws enforced. And like you said, in South Carolina, the Democrat candidate is dramatically more conservative, not just on immigration, but a variety of issues than the Republican candidate. So it just goes to the point that this is an issue where right and left need to do more to come together against elites.
Do you think it's likely or possible that a significant number of Republicans will withhold their support from McCain because of his stand on immigration?
It's possible. I mean, I think that's clearly for some portion of people who would otherwise be McCain people. In other words, they respect the fact he's a veteran, he's a POW, all of that. The problem is it just sticks in their craw that not only is he for amnesty. I mean, John McCain is a lifelong supporter of multiculturalism, bilingual education, the whole package. Immigration is just one little piece of that. And I'd have to say that's the reason he's not ahead of Obama now. I mean, Obama is so weak in that area as a cosmopolitan and a post-American character that McCain should be cleaning his clock on this issue.
We have 1 minute before the break. What else in this book is particularly important to you?
Well, what's new about the book is the point. It's called The New Case Against Immigration. What's new? The new part is not the particular things about immigrant welfare or security concerns, sovereignty. People have written and talked about those. I have, others have. I think I put it together in a new way. The point being, the immigrants aren't less desirable. We've changed, not them.
So you're not against the people who want to immigrate here. You're against what's happened to America.
And some of it is not even bad, what's happened to America. Yeah. It's all just part of our maturation, our growing up as a society, and we've outgrown it.
We have to take another break. We'll be back for a final word with Mark Krikorian right after these messages. Please stay with us. One of the major activities of the Conservative Caucus is Constitution education. We want to help raise up a new generation of leaders who understand the underlying principles of the Constitution and the meaning of its key provisions. Through programs such as Conservative Roundtable, through mailings, workshops, conferences, seminars, we strive to communicate the legacy of the Founding Fathers. Each year we commemorate Constitution Day, September 17th. We publish newsletters, action bulletins, and other materials to promote an understanding of and fidelity to the Constitution, and we work with members of Congress who share our vision and share our concern. We hope you will decide to work with us as well by becoming a supporter of the Conservative Caucus.
www.conservativeusa.org, 703-938-9626.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. Our guest is Mark Krikorian, Executive Director of the Center for Immigration Studies. If you're interested in the kinds of issues we discuss on Conservative Roundtable, sponsored by the Conservative Caucus, please check out our website, conservativeusa.org. And if you'd like to receive, with no charge or obligation, some of our literature, please send us your fax number, 703-281-4108. Send us your address, is our fax number. And we'll be happy to mail things or even email things to you if you give us your email address. And how do people get in touch with you, Mark, and how do they learn more about this Very important book.
Our website is CIS.org. It's Center for Immigration Studies, CIS.org. And we have the whole introduction there for people to read for free, as well as reviews and blurbs from people who've read it, like Michelle Malkin and Bill Bennett and some others who were kind enough to give me some very nice comments about the book.
Well, I would, chatting with you, I would characterize you, and forgive me if I'm wrong, as a pessimist realist.
Yeah, I guess.
Is that fair?
An optimistic pessimist, maybe? I don't know.
So how do you see this debate unfolding in the future? What's going to happen?
Well, the next few years are not going to be, all that encouraging. I mean, we have, two candidates who are terrible. Whoever's in office, whichever one wins in November, isn't really going to move the ball forward.
But there could be
from
a
our
tremendous
perspective.
backlash in the 2010 elections.
There could be. I'd have to say probably more of a backlash if Obama's president than if McCain is, because if McCain is, he muddies the water, quite frankly. But in the medium and long term, I have no doubt that we're going to reassert control over our immigration policies because of the basic incompatibility between mass immigration and modern society. It's a 19th century policy that's just out of place in the 21st century.
But as you pointed out, immigrants, particularly those from south of the border, are an increasingly significant share of our population. Aren't they going to have an impact on elections?
Yeah, sure, but you can't think of immigrants as somehow a monolithic voting bloc. Hispanics in general, or immigrants in general, are just not. They experience a lot of the same problems with immigration. In fact, yesterday's immigrants are the first people who are impacted by tomorrow's immigration, their schools, their jobs, their neighborhoods. So no, a patriotic but empathetic
Of course, you see the same
work.
thing. Italian Americans, Irish Americans were ostracized, and then they became more American than the Americans.
Right, exactly. And so there's hope for that. Nothing's ever really finished in politics, and the only question is, how much damage will we have to make up before we fix things?
Mark, thanks for sharing your time with us,
Howard.
and thank you for watching Conservative Roundtable. Don't forget The New Case Against Immigration by Mark Krikorian. See you next time.